Okay, guys, let's get the second part knocked out. We're going to take a look at all the water on the earth. Now, this is not completely comprehensive, but it will get you some good basics. So make sure you're on the front cover once this is folded in half, when it says introducing all the water on the earth. And we're going to look at 6 categories of water on the earth. The first is going to be salt water. As you know, the oceans make up 75% of the water on earth, and that's going to leave 25% more to go to all of our freshwater sources, which is going to include everything else in this list. We have ponds and lakes that are large bodies of fresh water. We're also going to include our estuaries and things like that in this category. We have ice caps and glaciers, which include a large portion of the fresh water on Earth. This water is largely inaccessible to us right now. It is melting. There is global warming occurring, but the majority of our fresh water is tied up in ice caps and glaciers, so it's relatively inaccessible and not something we're using. Groundwater, on the other hand, is a source of water that we use for a great many things that we'll talk about in just a few minutes. This is going to include our aquifers, which are underground, as well as just those smaller sources of groundwater that you tap into when you have a well at home. We also have lakes and rivers. These are very mobile bodies of water. We're going to roll our creeks and streams and all of those into this category. These are all traveling, well, all water is traveling downhill in its liquid state, and these are often moving onto other areas. And I see where I got a little bit repetitive here, that lakes and rivers, you can just write rivers and streams there for the 5th one as opposed to lakes and rivers. I didn't realize I'd been so redundant in the notes. And then finally, we also have water in the atmosphere, and this is going to be our water vapor. This is water that also has condensed and is in the atmosphere that we can see as liquid water in the form of clouds. Let's start off at the top thinking about a few ways that we use water, and there are going to be 5 primary ways we use water. The first one is for hygiene. We use it to wash clothes and other items, brush our teeth, bathe ourselves. We also use water for eating. We use it to cook, we use it to drink, and we use it as parts of foods. If you drink milk, it does include water. If you drink Gatorade, it does include water. We also use water for recreational purposes where we like to have fun. We go swimming, surfing, skiing. We have water fights. There are lots of ways that we enjoy water, both in its solid and liquid forms. Water is also used to provide us with energy, such as hydroelectric power. This does require interaction with these streams, which can lead to pollution. A few different types, and it can also change the way streams and rivers flow, which can have a negative impact on the environment and the ecology of those areas. But it is a source of energy that a lot of areas use, and it is overall probably considered cleaner than fossil fuel, though it does definitely have some environmental repercussions. And we also use water for protection. We use it as fire extinguishers, or to extinguish fires. And we actually also use water for transportation, which is not on this list and probably should be added. Most of Earth's water is going to be at the North and South poles, bound up in ice, as I mentioned earlier. We do not have access to most of our fresh water, and this should say most of Earth's fresh water. It's at the North and South poles in the form of ice. As you know, most of our liquid water is going to be salt water found in our oceans. It is important to know the amount of water has stayed about the same over the past several millions of years. However, the form or state of the water is constantly changing. When we're talking about the states of water, I mean the solid, liquid, and gas forms of water. Water is found on Earth in all 3 of these states, which makes it a unique compound on Earth. There isn't another one found in all 3 states naturally. Water in its solid state is ice. The molecules are not moving very much at all, just vibrating in place. In its liquid form as liquid water, the molecules are moving more, sliding past one another, but still touching and holding on to one another, forming temporary connections. And then finally, in the gas form, the water molecules are separated from one another, have more space, and are moving around the most. And as they heat up, they move more. Their density is going to decrease, and those are going to rise in the atmosphere. This heating is powered by the sun. The sun is the driving force of Earth's weather. It is the major source of energy that powers the water cycle. That radiant energy of the sun reaches the earth. It may heat up the water directly, or it may heat up the earth, which then heats up the air, causing the air to rise, leading to wind, which moves our water vapor. As that warmed water vapor rises, it's going to condense into clouds. We use water, humans do, primarily from springs, which is a good, clean source typically of drinking water. We also have streams, creeks, rivers, and lakes, which all provide us with sources of fresh water that can be used for those 5 ways we listed before, in addition to transportation. Then salt water is also something we use. We do use the oceans. Those are primarily used more for transportation, recreation, and some sources of energy. We don't use salt water for bathing or eating. The salt is corrosive and will damage the things we wash. And we can't drink salt water because it will actually cause us to dehydrate. However, we can distill the water. We can remove the salt from the water, and ocean water can be used as a source of fresh water once it's been desalinated or have the salt removed. Now, there are 2 classifications of water. We've already mentioned these. Let's just make sure they're in our notes. We have salt water that is found in the oceans, and we also have fresh water that is our primary source of drinking water, because it really is a bit of a hassle to desalinate the ocean water. Finally, I want to remind you the water cycle has no start and no end. Do not get caught up on where the water cycle starts. Sometimes you'll have water that will go back and forth, between different parts of the water cycle. You may have liquid water in the form of condensated water in clouds, and it may become too warm as those clouds move, and it may evaporate. The clouds do not necessarily always form precipitation. Those of you who've started looking at clouds, you know there are different types of clouds, and some of those will disperse as they heat up during different parts of the day, and they don't end up producing rain. Some clouds, especially our nimbus clouds, remember that indicates rain, are going to eventually produce precipitation. Sometimes the precipitation makes it all the way to the ground. Sometimes it evaporates on its way to the ground and actually re-enters the water cycle as water vapor without becoming runoff and without percolating down through the soil. So just remember, the water cycle has no beginning, no end. It is not always the situation where one molecule of water follows the cycle perfectly around the loop. Sometimes it cuts corners and different things will occur during the water cycle. So every molecule of water does not go through every stage sort of in one cycle. All right, guys, make sure your notes are filled in. I know the water cycle is something you're familiar with. I do expect you to know the parts of the water cycle, to know those major terms that are involved in the water cycle: the evaporation, condensation, precipitation, runoff, and percolation. Also, make sure you're familiar with transpiration, that process where plants release water vapor into the atmosphere and it becomes a part of that water in the atmosphere. Make sure you understand where most of our water is found, that it is salt water and not fresh water, and that most of our fresh water is tied up as ice at the North and South Poles and in ice packs on top of some of the mountains. Remember how we use water, why it's important to us, and that the sun is the driving force that provides the energy that powers our water cycle, heating the earth, which in turn warms the troposphere. This leads to the processes of evaporation, and as convection currents move the air, it will cool and the upper layers of the atmosphere condense, and it can lead to precipitation. If you have any questions about these sheets, please make sure you let me know. Thanks.